Folks, we're going to do something I hope is pretty cool today. And hopefully we got the materials we need, because I am not trying to go back to the house. We got 300 plus pounds of woven wire fence. We got trees between my neighbor's property and mine to get it from where it is to where it needs to go. And you can't use a tractor. Terrain's not going to allow. Can't use a side-by-side. There's no mechanical means except for your BMWs, and that means boots made for walking, to get this stuff from here to there. Now, I was praying that the good Lord give us a good way of doing this, and it wasn't until we actually arrived on this site that I think we've come up with a way that'll work. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to get this thing, we're going to rig it up, and we're going to explain to you how we did it without the aid of any mechanical or any machinery or anything like that. We're going to show you how we do this. Hopefully it works. So whether it does or it doesn't, folks, this is how we're going to give it a shot. We're going to hang this thing in the air and somehow hope and pray that it works. So with that said, let's get to work. All right, first step was just getting this material here. So go back and watch our one rope bridge video, see how we did that. So now that it's here, we used our dolly to get it the rest of the way. The idea that I've come up with is basically we're going to basically drawing the initial idea from electric work and how we would do it there. Now, basically what my plan is we just cut down a piece of deadfall, and we got it. This is going to sit on the bottom, and this is going to be something of an axle going up through the middle of it. So William whittled this out to make it a little flat, and I used the Sawzall to kind of halfway make that flat, so it's going to fit in like so. Problem is, I only got duct tape over here, and I could use some of this barbed wire to maybe wrap that on there, but then it occurred to me, I don't go anywhere without 550 cord. I always replace, no matter what I'm wearing, I always replace it with 550 cord, or some people call it paracord. All right, I'm gonna be without boot strings, but it beats making a trip all the way back to the house. So necessity is the mother of invention. We're gonna take this, and I guess it's maybe about 7 feet long when it's all said and done. All I'm going to do is like we did when we made that one rope bridge. I'm going to frap this to this, and we're going to use that notch to kind of keep it in place. So I'm going to start off with a clove hitch. And like I said, folks, I'm kind of making this up as I go along. I'm going to make a really long clove hitch. All right, right there is a clove hitch, folks. And I'm going to leave this little running end a little bit long. So all I'm going to do is frap it or make figure eights around this to this. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to solve the shoestring problem here in a minute. I ain't sure it's going to work, but we'll find out. So I'm going to run this over here as tightly as I can. All right, so we're going to do it off this way. You know, I keep getting a lot of folks reaching out, one of which is my mentor, telling me that, you know, it's long needed that we do a comprehensive knot video, especially on farm knots. Folks, if you're interested in seeing that sort of thing, let us know down below, and maybe we'll go ahead and cover that. I think we're going to cover it anyway, but if it's something you would find interesting, let me know. So I'm running around here. Remember, I left this running end pretty long. All right, I got this in there, and I'm going to tie a square knot. It would work better if I used a double fisherman or something like that, but I'm going to tie a square knot. Square knot's cool for joining two ropes of equal diameter. Got my square knot here. If I left this here just like that, it's probably going to be just fine. Now, I'm reluctant to tie like a double fisherman in there, because with knots like that, the harder you pull, the tighter they get. And I'm going to need a rope wrench to get this out, meaning a knife. Well, I want my shoestrings back. So, yeah, there's one shoestring I don't have. And I'll show you how I'm going to solve that here in a second. But anyway, got this done. And I think that's going to hold. Under tension, I think it's going to be just fine. We got our notches in there, and we got our fraps. So we'll go ahead and stick that axle up in there once I get me some shoestrings. All right, every project we do, I always got duct tape or something nearby. Tie wire, duct tape. Well, I ain't about to lace my boots up with some tie wire. So pull my high speed. I guess I could tie some tie wire here, but I'm going to show you a little trick here. Okay, on the tongue of my boot here, I'm just going to start this duct tape, and then I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to back wrap it. And I'm going to explain that here in a minute. I use back wrapping all the time. Now I'm going to hold this as tight as I can. I'm putting it on the tongue and I'm back wrapping it for a reason. Because if you're worried about getting residue on your boots, that's gonna solve it right there. So when, doggone it. Yeah, put this in a blooper reel.
Yeah, this is going in the film, dude.
Okay. So, okay, my foot ain't gonna fall out of this, right? So now I gotta worry about it sticking to my pant leg. So I'm gonna turn it around. All right. I ain't got no shoestring, and then I'm gonna make a little flag on the end of it like so. It's unnecessary because when I show you how I'm gonna get out of this thing, it'll make perfect sense. Hopefully I remember. I ain't got no shoestrings, but my boots ain't gonna fall off either. All right, folks, remember this video isn't so much about running fence as much as it is trying to figure out how to run fence in tough places. And this is one of them, believe me. I run a lot of fence, and this is about as tough as it gets. So we're at the point now where I gotta hang. The idea is I'm going to take this strap, throw it up over this limb that just is somewhat in line with where we need to be. We'll throw it up over there. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Get it over there, and now I'll get William to get up there and climb and do that part of it. And then we're going to hang a come-along from there. And the come-along with the rope is going to be attached to this device that I'm about to slide up to the bottom of here. So, here's where the on-site engineering really comes into play. So somehow we're going to hang our come-along up there from this tree limb. Probably use this strap in some kind of way because I really don't want to cut that rope any more than I have. We're going to hang this come-along. Then we're going to come off the come-along to a rope that's attached to that piece of wood. And we're going to use another knot that you've seen me use a number of times if you've watched this channel for any period of time. So let's do it. All right, we got it around that tree limb up there. And all I'm gonna do, this is a tree that's nearby. There's another knot, folks, you've seen me do before. I can do any number of knots, but it's just gonna be a round turn with 2 half hitches. And I'm not worried if it gets too tight because it's not one of those situations where I need to make a quick release. So I'm just gonna make a round turn with 2 half hitches going in opposite directions. If you do it the other way, it's a girth hitch. But right there, the harder this thing pulls, the more it's going to bite into that tree. It doesn't need to be as secure as a Prusik, which is what we're going to do next. All right, here's where the rubber meets the road. We're going to see if this little concept works. Okay, now that it's kind of stood up here, I'm going to do this by myself to show that it can be done by yourself. I mean, it's always great to have help, but if you don't, I mean, this thing ain't filming itself. William's back there doing all that. Okay, folks, you see me tie it before in previous videos, just about every one. In fact, one of the most useful and not well-known knots on the farm, in my view, is the Prusik. I'm gonna show you how to do that again. All right, you've seen me do this knot a few times in videos. It's called a Prusik. And in my view, it's probably one of the most useful farm knots and the least known. If you know what you're doing with it, it can make your life a lot easier. So let me go ahead and dress this up a little bit. It's not going to be perfect, but good enough to where you can get the point. And I'll show you what it's for. Okay? When it's not under tension, it can slide up and down quite easily. Maybe not on wood, but you get the point. When it's under tension, which it will be, it digs in like nobody's business. And that's exactly what we need right now. So another knot you've seen me do. It's another one of my favorites. Trust me, there's a lot in the knot book here. There's a lot of things I could do. I could do any middle of the line knot, meaning that any knot that I need in the middle of the line, I can do that here. You can do what's called a wireman's. You can do a bowling on a bite. You can do any number of things. But my favorite, and you've seen me do it numerous times, is the cat's paw. And it goes like 1, 2, stick them together, and then stick them up through this. And that's what it looks like when it's kind of dressed up. You always dress up your knots. You always want to do that. That's what it should look like. And remember, the cool thing about this is that even under tension, when I take the tension off, unlike any other middle of the line knot, this one comes back to form without cutting it off, no matter how much tension it's under. So, okay, the idea is we're going to use this come along and raise this thing up. All right, time to go uptown. All right, the reason I favor something like this is that because in here, you're saying, well, why didn't you just hang it with a rope? Well, I need something that swivels, right? So if this thing goes, it needs to go just like that because there's always a swivel, at least in this part of it. It's not the best in the world. It'd be a lot better if it had something that had ball bearings. But I can already tell you, one of the fundamental problems here is that I'm afraid as we're pulling this thing, it's gonna wanna swing. And this is gonna be more harm than good. So maybe we'll give it a shot, but if it becomes a problem, we're gonna have to find some way to tether this thing to the ground. So that's where we're gonna take it next. This thing looks like so far it's doing exactly what I want it to do. Only problem is when we get to yanking this thing down here, it's gonna be swinging back and forth if it's not tethered to the ground. So instead of finding out something I already know is gonna happen, we came over with these to begin with. The original plan before I actually got on site was to take this piece of scrap rebar and stick this whole thing on it, tie my Prusik into here and go that way. As I got here and saw the materials, this is what we came up with, and I think it's a better solution. So now, I got a little clip thing in there. It's like something you can use on a dog collar. I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing in the ground, hopefully far enough, and we're gonna put something else that swivels on there and then probably have to wind up using my other boot string to make this work. So, didn't start off this day thinking we'd have to go all Sapper and MacGyver on you, but that's how it goes sometimes. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. All right, this little corkscrew anchor is underneath it, and we happen to have one of these in the bucket. I brought it over thinking that it might come in handy. Well, I didn't realize just how handy, because I don't want to take off my other boot lace and try it that way. So I need to anchor this to this. I need some way. Looks like we can raise this up a little bit more. It looks like I can slide it over there. But look, if the top is swiveling and the bottom isn't, we got problems. So I don't need it to hold any weight. I just need it to swivel and keep this thing in place. It's not really doing a whole lot in terms of securing anything. So I'm just gonna, hopefully I got enough of a running end on the bottom of this, but take my word for it, I'm gonna do a round turn with 2 half hitches. You hear me saying these same knots over and over again, folks. I know a lot of them, but that's not what's important, is that the ones that you find most useful, just get really proficient. Know what they're for, know how they work and what they can do in your favor. So right now, it doesn't look real pretty, but it's gonna get the job done. So when this thing spins, or when we're pulling on it, it ain't going nowhere. At least theoretically it shouldn't. Let me put an overhand in there just to make sure it does. All right, the bottom's anchored. Everything's in place. It's gonna swing a little bit, but you got all this extra rope, so what do you do with it? Well, in this case, here, I'm gonna show you a little trick. You stuff it down here to some extent. Don't go all the way to the bottom. Loop it over the top. Stuff it down in there some more. Loop it over the top. Because if you leave it on the ground, it's only going to get caught up in your own work. You don't want that. So we're going to take all of our excess, run it right through here. Folks, I'm doing a lot of different tricks and skills, all learned from a bunch of different places. So now the rubber hits the road. We got this thing secured. We're in a very, very tough, difficult place to access. But now we're going to go off and running, yank this thing through the woods, and then the area that it's got to connect into is another 40 feet that way. So we got to tail this. We got to make sure not only we get that in, but we got enough tail on it to marry up to the fence that's up the hill. Not the ideal way to do this, believe me. I would have much preferred to pull it from down there, but I ain't trying to pull this thing uphill. So you got to make adjustments, folks. That's the nature of this farm game, right? So now that we got it here, it's time to cut this thing loose. And we might have to go enlist Michelle's help, because to run out 300 feet of this thing is going to take more than 2 of us. So let's do it. All right, so we got this thing all ready to go. It's anchored at the bottom, swivels on both ends. Okay, now my hypothesis, I see a couple of weak points that I wish I'd have thought through beforehand. Had I given this more thought, I would have probably noticed it. Because this wire is bound tight, when I break the bands on it, it's going to expand. I just hope it all doesn't just fly right off the end of this. In hindsight, I think I should have made this thing out to about here. but we'll see. Even if it doesn't, I mean, it'll make up in time. It just may be a pain at first. That's the biggest problem I see right off. So with that said, we're going to go ahead, break the bands loose. We got Michelle here to help. And when you do this sort of thing, like typically, if it were on flat ground, and let's say we're in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, whatever, we just roll this stuff down, stand it up, stretch it, get it where it needs to go. We don't have that benefit here. So in this particular case, we're just going to walk this down. We got T-posts all the way up and down here. You can't even see them. And they don't go in a straight line based on the property line. So it's going to take some doing, and we're just going to have to get after it. I'm just hoping that this is enough to make it down there. My suspicion it is, but you never know until you give it a shot. So with that, enough talking, we're going to get on to it. Hey, we got some pliers in there. Y'all, this little contraption worked, and I'm quite pleased with it. So the moral to the story is use 550 shoelaces because you never know when you're going to need to do something like this. Anyway, with all the MacGyver stuff aside, we got a little bit left on here because what you don't see in this frame is we got to marry this up with the fence that's down there, join them together, then stretch the whole thing. And maybe stretching is another video too, because we do that differently as well. And we do it with expedient means. So I'm pretty pleased with it. Everything's good, and we'll just drive on. So folks, hopefully this is a big help to you, especially for those of you that don't have tractors or live in very rough terrain or trying to figure out how to put fence in very difficult places, like trees that are literally a foot apart that separates your property line from the next person. So here's a solution for you, low-tech solution, high ingenuity, you get the drift. Anyway, hope it helps. Remember, subscribe, tell your friends about us, hit that notification bell. Till next time, this is Billy, the Permaculture Pimp Daddy, where PIMP stands for permaculture is my passion. We'll see you next time. Almost forgot, remember, I don't have a boot string, but here's why you want to back wrap that. You don't want to be too crazy. When you cut this, when you back wrap that duct tape, bam, comes off. Just like that. I ought to make a commercial. So there you have it. I can recover my boot lace and walk around like a normal human being.